I'm going to start sharing my screen. Well, if you're here, you're at the Selling Meat in Maine meeting. Again, we are recording these sessions. We're also live streaming them on Facebook. If you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat. You can find the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and it will open up a new window to your right, and you type in your comments or questions at the bottom of that and hit enter. And we'll all be able to see what your comments are. This is the agenda for today. Before we start, I want to thank all our speakers for agreeing to come on Zoom and share their information with us. I'm going to start. I did a short video on livestock and meat sales channels.
I'm Donna Coffin, and I work with farmers and gardeners in Piscataquis and Penobscot counties. I'll be talking about the various livestock and meat
Donna, you need to swap your screen.
that livestock producers have available, with a focus on red meat sales and a little about licenses you need in the various venues. Jennifer and Michelle will be providing greater detail in their talks. We have a fact sheet called Selling Beef in Maine that includes information from my talk today. Much of the information applies to pork, lamb, and goat sales. Live animal sales require the fewest regulations for livestock producers. Many producers sell their stock right off the farm to individuals, brokers, and aggregators. If selling to an auction, the farmer transports the animal to the auction site and pays the consignment fee. Some specialty auctions may have preconditioning requirements that you need to follow. Farmers raising breeding stock that have been carefully bred for superior traits can be sold by private treaty or at purebred auctions. While purebred breeding stock may command a high price, commercial cattle may bring a low price. Red meat sales through live animal or meat cuts can happen in a number of ways. Live animal auctions and selling to a live animal broker or aggregator is the lowest level of marketing effort and the lowest cost of marketing. No license is required, but the price received may be the lowest. Aggregators may have some production guidelines for farmers to follow. A meat distributor may purchase live animals from farmers that the farmer takes to a licensed slaughter facility to process. If the farmer retains ownership of meat with the intent on selling to grocery stores or restaurants, more regulations need to be followed, and the cost of processing and marketing to the farmer increases. Also, the meat has to be stored so it doesn't thaw out before it is delivered to the store or restaurant. If meat is stored on the farm, special care must be taken to assure there is backup for electricity in case of an extended power outage. All this adds to your marketing costs. When selling cuts of meat to grocery stores or restaurants, the slaughtering must be done at a Maine or USDA inspected facility. Prices received may be moderate, and the farmer will sustain processing and storage costs until the meat is delivered to the store. Care must be taken to be sure that you are paid in a timely manner. Cash on delivery is a good way to assure that you're paid. Use of the credit card systems can be helpful. Selling direct to consumers can start with a freezer trade or custom sales, where there are few regulations. Once you move to selling individual cuts of meat direct to consumers, you move to more licensing and regulations, but the prices received per animal increase. Again, the cuts of meat must be stored properly and protected from power outages. We've all heard about the person with a freezer full of meat that was either accidentally unplugged or sustained extended power outage, and they lost 300 to 400 pounds of meat.
But going on, when you're selling whole carcasses or sides to your friends and neighbors, you transport the animal to the slaughter facility, and your customer usually pays for the animal, the slaughter, and the processing costs. While the marketing effort and regulation is low, the price farmers receive can be low. Higher prices can be realized by selling by the cut, but an inspected facility is needed, and marketing labor and costs are increased. Also, care must be taken to market all cuts, or you can end up with a freezer full of roasts that you can't sell. Offering pre-selected mixed cuts of meat can help reduce this risk. Internet sales require special packaging to assure the meat does not thaw. This is an additional cost that needs to be included in the selling price. And I put together this schematic of agencies that can become involved in the sales of meat. You'll notice at the bottom, with home harvest and custom exempt, no meat sales or cuts of meat are allowed, but the freezer or custom sales by side or quarter are permitted. We'll be hearing from the Maine Department of Agriculture folks who will have all the specifics of what is needed for wholesale and retail meat sales. Remember, they are here to help you and work with you to bring your operation into compliance. Here is my contact information and the link to the Selling Beef in Maine fact sheet that I mentioned earlier. And I'm sorry for the glitches. I will stop my share and turn it over to Colt, who will be talking about how to tell when animals are ready for market. Can you share your screen, Colt?
Yep. We're working on that right now. Okay. All right. Hopefully y'all are seeing the correct screen.
Looks good.
Okay. So I've only got a short amount of time to present this topic, but I thought I would go over why it is so important to make sure that your animals are at proper finishing weight before taking them to slaughter, and then go over some visual cues that we can look at to make sure that those animals are in the proper condition. So why does it matter? Well, because we are looking at meat quantity, meat quality, and economy of producing our product. If we take animals to slaughter before they have reached proper finishing weight, they're going to have less muscle on their bone, and their dressing percentage is going to be lower because they haven't had a time to fill out yet. And so you're going to leave money on the table. Now, on the alternative side, if you wait too long, the animals quit packing on muscle and they start packing on more fat and more organ size. And even though the animal is larger, they'll have a smaller dressing percentage. And then we will lose money there on wasted feed. And the longer we keep the animals, the more potential there is for death loss or sickness to occur. And if that happens, you have to treat the animal and then you have to hold them for so long and let all those antibiotics or treatments work their way through the system, so on and so forth. So there's a real economical reason to make sure that those animals are in the proper condition before taking them to the processing plant. The other reason is meat quality. And there are several driving factors for meat quality. The first and foremost is genetics. They have to have the genetic potential to produce good quality meat. Of course, that genetic potential cannot be realized unless the animal is fed with adequate and proper nutrition. So genetics and nutrition, extremely important. Third would be the environment and handling of the animal. So we could have perfect genetics, make sure those animals have lots of feed, but if they are in a terrible environment, if they're standing in mud up to their belly button, that's going to impact the quality of that beef. And then the handling of the animal. I'm going to give you two specific examples. If you stress pigs before they go to the slaughterhouse, they will suffer from a condition called PSE, or pale, soft, and exudate of meat, and ruin the quality of the meat. Beef cattle, if you stress them before taking them to the slaughterhouse, you could get what's called a dark cutter. And so low stress handling is just as important as genetics, nutrition, and proper housing of those animals. So now let's switch gears, and we're going to go over swine, small ruminants, beef cattle, and rabbits today. How can you tell, or what are the indicators to know when they are in the right condition to take to the processor? Swine are a little bit different than beef cattle because pigs put on fat very easily. And we generally think of pigs as putting on a healthy amount of muscle till they reach about 250 pounds, maybe 260 pounds. And then after that, they start putting on relatively more fat than muscle. And so if you let pigs get too large, you end up feeding them to build fat content and not muscle content. And then that fat's not worth a lot on a pig. Once we get so much, we need so much to make our good sausage. We need so much to add quality into the meat. But after that, we're basically wasting money feeding those pigs. And so ideally, if you have a heritage breed pig, they're going to be between 250 and 275 pounds. And if you have a more commercial bred pig, the going size on those right now is anywhere between 275 pounds and 300 pounds. But to know whether we're putting on enough back fat or not, we can use body condition scoring. So swine are scored on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being extremely thin and emaciated, and the number 5 being roly-poly fat. And ideally, we want those pigs in a body condition score 3, 3.5 when we're taking them to the processor. That means that they have all the muscle that we need, plus they've got a nice layer of fat surrounding that. And at that 3 to 3.5, they're going to start depositing some intramuscular fat. That's one thing I forgot to mention on this previous slide, especially with beef. When we think of quality of meat, what drives the quality of meat, other than the genetics and the nutrition, is how much fat is deposited within that meat. And there's two different types of fat. There's external fat and there's intramuscular fat. In beef steaks, we would call that marbling. So the more marbling you have, it adds more flavor and it makes the steak taste juicier. And juicier makes it seem more tender. So the meat is only going to be as tender as the genetics and handling of the animal allows, but you can trick that a little bit if you've got good intermuscular fat. So if we look at some of these USDA graded steaks, you'll see these prime steaks have got lots of intermuscular marbling, whereas down here at the select, it's basically devoid of intramuscular fat. Now, in the swine industry, back in the 70s and 80s, when the doctors were telling us that red meat was bad for you and you should only eat small, lean portions, the industry responded by breeding all the fat out of like pigs and chickens and beef cattle. And we ended up with an inferior product, and it's taken us decades to realize that. And we are now breeding much better quality pork and beef that has that intermuscular fat in there. But keep in mind, we want that body condition score 3 or 4. So if we're looking at the back and side of the pig, they should be nice and rounded over the tail head, but not exceptionally plump. And you shouldn't be able to see any of their ribs. And now when we're talking about small ruminants like sheep and goats, generally speaking, the drivers are going to be ethnic holidays, and a lot of the ethnic markets like a little bit lighter weight animal. And then age is another quality thing with small ruminants. So in sheep, a lamb is a year or younger. And then once they get older than that, uh, they start developing that mutton taste, and folks don't like that as much. So we generally like to slaughter younger, small ruminant animals. And the average lamb weight in the US is about 135 pounds. And sheep and goat weights vary regionally. You'll see some regions prefer smaller goats, in the 40 to 50 pound range, and in some regions prefer that 60 to 70 pound uh, weight. Uh, some ethnic groups want intact males that haven't had their tails docked, so that's important to keep in mind. But age cannot be undersold here. The older an animal gets, the tougher the meat gets. And so, for a quality perspective, younger animals are more tender, and more tender animals have a better eating experience on the palate for the end user. Real quick, in case anyone likes to raise rabbits, this comes from I forget, this is the Rabbit Society that put out these specifications. Uh, Fryers, these are rabbits that are 4 to 5 pounds and not over 10 weeks. Roasters are under 6 months of age and between 6 and 8 pounds. And stewers, these are just the old big rabbits, or most of the time they're the cull animals from the breeding herd, are generally over 8 pounds. And then the next one, and I see folks getting this wrong a lot here in Maine, is beef cattle. In beef cattle, we're really looking at body weight, age, and fat content. Generally speaking, grain-fed animals reach finishing weight at 12 to 18 months if they're grain finished. Grass-fed animals are generally 24 months or older. Now, in the grand scheme of things, we prefer animals that are less than 30 months old because they cannot be graded if they are over 30 months old because of BSE or mad cow concerns. However, New England does not have any USDA graders, so that does not come into play at the processors here for age restrictions, but those older animals will have tougher meat, and that will lead to a negative eating experience for your consumers. So you want to get those finished younger is better. And then the fat content, we really need to pack on that fat on beef cattle because if we produce a very lean beef steer or heifer, again, the eating experience is going to suffer. It's going to be less tasteful and tougher to eat that type of meat. And where are we looking at for muscle and fat deposits on beef cattle to tell if they're done? Well, the first place I look is over the ribs, over the tail head, and in the flank. But the other areas that we need to look at on heifers is underneath the tail, or in heifers or steers is right around their dew claws, the width of their stance, and around their face, and especially the brisket. So we have a finished heifer, and she happens to be an Angus or a British variety heifer. British variety of beef cattle will put on more fat than a continental breed. But continental breeds usually are larger framed and more heavily muscled. That would be something like a Charolais or a Simmental. But let's look at this beef heifer. You can't feel her ribs at all. So if you were to rub your hand along this animal's rib cage, it would feel like the back of your hand. You know, if you push down, you could feel the ribs just like you could feel the bones in the back of your hand, but it's a nice smooth gradient over there. Her flank has dropped some, and if you were to palpate that flank area, it would feel meaty and not just like loose skin hanging there. And look at this big brisket on the front of her. Now, a continental breed animal, they don't put on as much fat, so their briskets are smaller. But on these British type breeds, you're looking for briskets the size of cantaloupes when you palpate them. And then over their tail head, you can see this nice cushiony fat around the tail head that you can push on. That's a good sign. And then something that's unique with heifers is if you look directly under the vulva, you'll see that she has this rope-like appearance to the fat in the skin under her vulva. It will almost appear braided, and that's why it's called a rope fat. Now let's look at steers, an unfinished steer versus a finished steer. And starting off with an unfinished steer, if you were to feel over the rib cage of this animal, it would feel like running your fingers over the back of your hand over your fingers. You could feel those ribs as you're going across there. The backbone is sticking out, pronounced like. The brisket is smaller. That flank area has not dropped at all. It would feel very tight, and you couldn't feel very much in between the skin. You can see up above the tail head here, there's no fat protruding out. Whereas on this finished steer, you can see this gentleman is highlighting this extra rump of fat. If you were to feel over this ribs, it would be nice and smooth. Look at how big that brisket is. You know, it's cantaloupe or maybe even watermelon size. When you get down and feel those briskets in person, they'll be jiggly. You can just feel that fat in there. The flank has definitely dropped down and it's nice and full. You grab a hold of that, it'd be loose and meaty. And then something else we can look at with this steers, aside from the tail head and the brisket, is look at the width of their stance. You know, do they have a nice wide stance to support all that extra weight that they have? And do their dew claws look pudgy? If they're starting to put on fat around their dew claws, that means they are getting some good fat content on there. Now, here in Maine, we have a lot of dairy influence. And so dairy animals put on fat and have very similar characteristics to the British breeds, except they just don't have as much muscle. So we would not expect to see as much muscling on these animals. But look here at her brisket is nice and filled out. And look here at his flank. It's nice. It has dropped and it's got a nice meaty feel to it, nice and loose. I'm sorry that I wish I had a back picture for this animal, but you can see this hump of fat around the tail head forming here. And so we know this animal is ready to go. Even though they have less muscle than a purebred beef breed, they're still putting on that good fat. And Holstein influence animals actually do a very good job of putting on intermuscular fat. So if we feed them well and we get them to a proper finishing weight like this, that will be a very good quality beef. Just the dressing percentage is going to be about 5% lower because their bones are bigger and they don't put on as much muscle. And with that, I'll take any questions you may have. And just as this is of course a commercial packing plant, but look at the amount of back fat on these commercial pigs. It's about 1.5 inches. And that's about, you wouldn't want any more than that. And you look at the belly on this one, there's about 1 inch of fat down there on the belly. So that'll make good bacon. It will prevent the carcass from drying out while it's hanging. And there's enough there to make sausage, but not enough there just to fill our freezer with unuseful back fat or waste back fat. I hope that helps.
Okay. And I'm sorry I cut you short a little bit, Colt, but I let you run over a little bit more. I don't think Jennifer will mind. We do have some comments in the chat. Someone was asking if the slides or recordings will be shared, and I will be sharing those with folks who registered. If you didn't register, you can send me your email, and I can link you into that. Ryan did have a comment for pasture raised and fed corn grain. What would be the average age for finishing?
On beef cattle, grain finished is 12 to 18 months, depends on when you start feeding them grain. And on pasture or grass-fed only beef cattle, you're generally looking at 24 to 36 months. If you got like alfalfa pastures, you could do it in 22 months, but I've never seen a pasture in Maine that was good enough to accomplish that.
So would it be more like a combination of the two, where you're kind of you're supplementing grass with the grain? Are you looking closer to the 16 to 18 months?
Yeah. If you're supplementing enough grain on a pasture raised animal, they'll get done in 18 months, no problem.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, that's how feedlots are run across the United States. They're just grain fed the last 120 to 160 days of their life.
Good. Colt, will you be on so you could respond to questions in the chat?
Yeah, I'm hanging out. This is my last one for today. So
Okay, very good. Well, we'll move on now to Dr. Jennifer Everly with the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. She's our state veterinarian. And I'll share my screen. She sent me slides. Let's hope I do this a little bit better than I did for mine. Do folks see her slides?
I can see.
Okay. Jennifer, did you turn on your?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Actually, before I start, I have a question for Colt. Is there any variation in the time for finishing depending on whether it's a spring born or a fall born calf for beef?
Yes and no. So the ones that are raised throughout the winter time are going to have an increased nutritional demand, about 20% probably. But if you give them that extra feed, they should reach weight about the exact same time. But
So economically, is it in the interest to have a spring born calf then?
yes.
Okay.
Unless you can get a premium for having off-season calves from fall calves.
Yeah, that's true.
Which that does work out in some markets. Like, if you're in Kentucky or Tennessee, where almost everyone's spring calving, those fall calving people can fill a niche, and cost of production is more, but they can usually get more for their calves. So that's an economics thing. It just costs more to feed them through the winter than it does the summer. And of course, in the summer, you get all that free grass, whereas in the winter, you're feeding hay.
Well, and I was just thinking about it specifically for Maine, because obviously feed costs in the winter are high. So, okay. So I can get started. Do you want to, Donna, are you able to hit where it starts the presentation, or?
This, you sent me a PDF.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. As long as everybody can see, it doesn't really matter, I guess. Okay, so I'm Dr. Everly. I'm gonna do a little introduction in a second, but I guess go ahead and scroll down, Donna. I'm gonna do my introduction. I'm gonna talk about some of the rules for meat sales, and then I'm gonna provide some resources, some websites, links to things at the end, as well as take questions. So as you can scroll down. As Donna said, I am not the state veterinarian. I am a state veterinarian. The state veterinarian that you call for quarantines and animal health would be Dr. Walsh. But it is in my title. But what I do is I'm the director of the Maine Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. You can advance. So the question for you guys on this call, you're trying to decide, you're thinking about selling red meat. Your first question, first and foremost, is who is my market? You can scroll down a little, because who your market is depends on what you do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to discuss is if you want to be able to sell anything, if you want to be able to sell to customers at your farm stand, you want to be able to wholesale it to restaurants, you want to be able to sell it to the other grocery stores down the street, the meat has to be inspected by either the USDA or the Maine Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. So here's an example of, this doesn't look like the order of slides I sent. Let me check real quick if it got, nope, I guess it is, my bad. Okay, so here's the, scroll back up. So here's a picture of two different marks of inspection. You can see the one on the left is USDA's mark of inspection. On the right, this is an old label, but because Weston's isn't doing poultry anymore, but you can see the Maine mark of inspection is the shape of Maine. This is what it looks like. You can scroll down. So what is the difference between USDA and MMPI inspected? And the short answer is where you can distribute it. You could scroll down. So both USDA and the Maine Meat and Poultry Inspection Program provide what's called continuous inspection. So there will be an inspector there to watch every minute of slaughter. And then they might not be there the whole day when you're processing, when they're cutting up the chops, but they're going to be there every day that you're doing processing. And the meat produced by USDA or by MMPI is equally safe. We follow all the same laws. We have the same regulations, etc. Keep going. So USDA inspected red meat can be distributed within the state of Maine. It can be sold, distributed to other U.S. states, and it can be exported. Meat that is animals that have been inspected by the state or by a state inspected red meat plant, and there's an exception, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But if it's a regular state inspected red meat plant, it can only be distributed within the state of Maine. Now, if you're only planning on selling at farmers markets in your area, it really doesn't matter, right? You don't necessarily have to worry about it going out of state. But if you say you live near the New Hampshire border, it might be important for you to be able to take that over state lines. Now, there is an exception. So if you want to scroll down, and I think I picked, the screenshot is from the establishments in the Maine program that have joined this particular program, is about 2 years ago, we signed a new cooperative agreement with USDA. And establishments that choose to go into this program, it's called the Cooperative Interstate Shipment Program, can distribute their meat in both Maine and out of state. Okay, so the three in Maine are Bisson's, Maple Lane, and Tide Mill, which is a poultry place. It cannot be exported, but mostly because none of them asked me to do a cooperative agreement for it to be exported. And if anybody asks, I'll do the agreement, but it wasn't worth the trouble because nobody asked. So at this point, if it's being sold, if it's being processed at these particular state establishments, it might as well be USDA. I mean, you can send it out of state, and you can market it to contracts that want federally inspected meat, that sort of thing. So you scroll down. So this one is an example, just so you could see what it looks like. This is Tide Mill's label. And you'll see the mark of inspection looks exactly like a USDA mark of inspection. So there's very little difference at this point for Tide Mill, because they can send it out of state, just like they could if it was USDA. Keep going down. And this is on our website, which I'm going to give you the link to at the end of the talk. But this shows the locations of all of the inspected slaughter and processing facilities in Maine. Okay. Just because this is a presentation on selling meat in Maine. So you can find whoever is most local to you. And keep going down. And the good thing about inspected meat is you can basically sell it anywhere. Sell it from your farm, sell it at farmers markets. You can wholesale it to hotels, restaurants, schools, wholesale it to grocery stores. You can sell it over the internet. If it's one of those facilities that hasn't joined that new CIS program, you would only be able to ship it to a Maine address because it has to stay in state. But CIS stuff could be shipped over state lines. Keep going. So the costs, this is a little more expensive in some ways. You've got to pay the slaughterhouse, obviously, for the kill fees, for processing it. You have to get your labels approved, either by if it's got a special claim, we have to approve it. If it's nothing special, they can approve it. But that takes time. Usually takes a couple weeks. You have to pay for the labels. You had to pay for some licenses, which Michelle Newbegin is going to talk about in her presentation. And this is probably the kicker right now is limited inspected capacity may cause delays, resulting in higher feed husbandry costs. Probably most of you know, if you're on this presentation, that the slaughterhouses are extremely busy, booked out until 2022 in some cases. And so, if you got an animal that according to Colt is done in December, but you don't have a date until February, that's a lot of money you're going to be wasting. So that is an issue right now in particular, just limited. Even before the pandemic, many of the slaughterhouses were pretty busy. And part of the problem too is in Maine, people do tend to do the spring calves. So the fall gets very, very busy. Most of the slaughterhouses have a little more time in the winter and spring. So that's something to take in mind if you're having trouble getting appointments, which I think people are at this point. Go ahead and go down. So let's talk about some of the other options out there. There's two options called the retail and the custom exemption, the retail exemption and the custom exemption. So these are both exemptions from the Federal Meat Inspection Act. So if you're doing either of these exemptions, you do not have to have an inspector there all the time like you do at an inspected place. They'll only visit once a year, more often if you're naughty, but generally about once a year. But in return for that, there's more limitations on distribution, which makes sense, right? Because there's not somebody there making sure that every single animal is safe. So if something were to happen, distribution is smaller and it's easier to track down that product. You want to keep going? So what I said, in exchange for less inspection and oversight, distribution is markedly diminished under the retail exemption. Go ahead. So the retail exemption, this is like, let's say you've got a farm stand. Maybe you have a nice kitchen where you could get a license to cut up your own meat. You can choose to process carcass halves or boxed meat from inspected facilities. So maybe you can't get a slaughter and processing date for your cow, but you could get a slaughter date only. And sometimes that's the, it just depends on the slaughterhouse, but sometimes they might be able to kill it for you, but they don't have time to process it. But this might be a good workaround. So you do not have to have an inspector there every day, but you do have to be licensed by us to do this retail exemption. Go ahead. You do not have to have a HACCP plan. And I didn't talk about that much, but inspected facilities have to have something called a HACCP plan. It's a comprehensive food safety plan. And it's a lot of records and it's a lot of work. So under the retail exemption, you do not have to have a HACCP plan, which saves you some time and effort, unless you're doing vacuum packing or making ready to eat foods. Go ahead. You can't slaughter any animals under this exemption. So this would be, you have to have the local slaughterhouse slaughter it for you, and then you go pick up the carcass halves, or you buy boxed meat from like a distributor, okay? And you can also only sell what's considered a normal retail quantity to a customer. You scroll down. So this is the limits for what's considered a retail quantity. So you could only sell 300 pounds in one transaction to a customer. That seems like an awful lot to me, but that's the number. It's in the regulations. Calves, you can only sell 37 pounds, et cetera, et cetera. So there are limitations on how much you can sell in a single transaction. Keep going. Um, anything that has been, now that's anything that has been smoked or cooked or rendered or cured, you can only sell that product directly to the end consumer. All right, you can't sell it to hotels or restaurants or institutions. You can only sell it from your online store, or you could sell it at a farmer's market, but it has to be directly to the end consumer. Keep going. Fresh has a little more leeway because fresh is a safer product than a ready-to-eat product in many ways. So up to 25% or $79,000 in sales, whichever is less, of your fresh products done under the retail exemption could be sold to hotels or restaurants or institutions. And then the other 75% has to be sold directly to customers. Just like all of the smoke product has to be sold directly to customers. Go ahead. And then you do have to keep records showing that your retail exempt operations are staying within these limits. And then if you're doing beef, you have to keep grinding logs. And you absolutely cannot sell to other stores. And I put this in big, bold red print because I would say over 50% of our compliance cases come where people have tried and succeeded in selling stuff that they processed under the retail exemption to other stores. And then you end up, we send you a letter of warning, and then you're on the naughty list, and we'll keep an eye on you. And, you can be fined. We don't usually fine you on the first offense, but we will most definitely fine you after that. So keep that in mind. Keep going. The costs associated with doing the retail exemption, you have to have a kitchen that can be licensed for meat processing. So you can't do this in the barn. You're going to have a running water and sinks and I don't know if you have stainless steel, but you got to have a decent kitchen. And Michelle can talk a little bit about when she talks about the license you need for this. You have to have an annual license. You will have to purchase meat from a distributor, or if you sent your cows to someplace to have them slaughter only for you, you're going to have to pay for them. And then obviously you're going to have to pay for labels. All right, we can go on. So then this one is the custom exemption. Animals slaughtered and processed by a custom operator for the personal use of the animal's owner, family, and non-paying guests are exempt from inspection. Now there's a viable business model here, but you got to pay attention to what you're doing. So keep going down. I got to say this at the beginning, and I'm going to say it at the end. You cannot sell custom exempt meat. And so you're wondering, why is this in a presentation about selling meat in Maine? You can, so go ahead and go down. I think I'm going to explain it a little better. You can sell shares in live animals while the animal is still alive. So the custom operator who slaughters and processes the animal must keep records of all the owners of an animal. So, for example, let's say you got a heifer that's going to be ready in October, and if you want to sell quarters, you find 4 people who buy the animal right from you while it's still alive. That's okay. Keeps going down. I'll talk about it a little more. You can charge them for selling shares in the animal. You can charge them for delivering the animal to the slaughterhouse. You can charge them for picking up or delivering the meat products. You don't have to charge them for all those things. You can just say, pay me $500 for this quarter, and I will bring it to you when it's done. But you cannot charge for the meat. And this is another big category where people get in trouble with the department, is they were able to sell maybe 3 of their 4 shares before the animal had their slaughter date. The animal gets slaughtered, and then they try to sell that last quarter on the internet, and you cannot do that. So keep going down. So another thing you got to pay attention to is technically there's no limit to the number of owners that an animal would have. So you could technically sell that cow to 1/20th of a cow to 20 different people. However, your custom operator has to keep a record for every owner of this cow, and they may not be excited about keeping 20 sets of records. So you really need to talk to your custom operator and see what they're willing to do, how many shares they're willing to deal with. Keep going. And so your costs on this is obviously the cost of raising the animal, but you need to be aggressive in marketing to make sure that you've sold every share before the animal goes to slaughter. And this can be tough because just like the inspected places, the custom places are pretty busy, especially in the fall when everybody wants to bring their animals in. And your inspection date is October 15th. You know, you got to have all of it sold by October 15th, or you're going to have a quarter that's stuck in your freezer that you're going to have to eat yourself. But other than that, really the only cost associated after the cost of raising the animal is the cost of the slaughter at the custom slaughterhouse. And I don't get into the details of how much people charge, but I think it probably is a little cheaper to have it processed at a custom place versus an inspected facility. Keep going. So here are some of the resources. This is our website, my website for my program. It's got maps and contact information for inspected facilities if you want to take it someplace, to a place like that, because you want to just be able to sell it wherever. There's also maps and contact information for the custom exempt facilities. A little, just to clarify something that Donna said in her, she had that flow chart and it had custom and it didn't have it going to MMPI. Custom operators do have to register with MMPI. So that was maybe not quite right, but they don't have to have a license. So keep going. But we do need to know who you are and what you're doing if you're a custom place. Then there's this webpage, which Michelle may or may not reference in her presentation, but this is the website for licensing. Unless you're doing custom, you are going to have licenses of some kind. If you were doing custom, if you were a custom slaughterer, you would just register with my program. Keep going. This is the main line. If you have questions about what you can and what can't you do and what licenses you need, this is the number that you would call. You'd be able to, eventually, you may have to go through we're not working in the office these days, but you can reach us via this number. And we can talk you through, and I get a lot of these calls and I do a lot of these talks. We can talk you through, I'm going to ask you, what do you want to do? Like, what is your end goal here? And remember too, you don't necessarily, things can change too. Lots of times people will come to me and say, oh, I want to be able to sell to these people and these people and these people. And it's like, okay, well, you can't, you don't have any customers yet. So, well, you could start with this and then build up your customer base and then move. This is mostly moving on from retail to inspected, but we can kind of talk you through your options. If you keep going, and I think that's the last slide. So I know that was a lot and it's really technical, but I hope I gave you kind of an overview. So I see there's some questions in the chat. Okay, so the first question I saw was, okay. Can you sell shares of animals for custom orders out of state? No, they can only be within the state of Maine. The next one is, any reason why a farm can't raise the animal themselves and custom slaughter the animals for customers? Can you speak to logistics here? All right, so there's two scenarios here. One is I do get calls sometimes. There are farmers who maybe have a goats or sheep that they want to sell to a customer who wants to slaughter it halal, right? But they don't want anything to do with it, right? And so they are allowed to, in their case, they are allowed to sell the the goat or the sheep to the customer and let them use the barn, right, to slaughter them. But the farmer, the guy who sold them the animal, cannot participate in the slaughter at all. Okay, they cannot be involved. And you don't have to be licensed, you don't have to be registered. This is just something that happens out there, and we do not regulate this. If you want to do something where you are selling shares and you want to slaughter it for your customers, you would have to register as a custom slaughterhouse. And if you're registered as a custom slaughterhouse, you do have some minimum sanitation standards you have to meet, some minimum facilities. You know, if you come to me and submit your registration to be a custom slaughterhouse and all you have is a barn and a garden hose, that is not, we're not going to call, you know, this, that's not going to work out. All right. So, but what I would suggest you do is, if that's something you want to do, is perhaps give us a call and you can talk to us about what facilities you have and how they can meet the regulations. For custom, you know, it doesn't say, for example, you have to have water that is 100 psi, you know, per whatever. But it does say you have to have adequate water to clean and to keep the products clean. So that's where I'm going to say, well, what do you have a garden hose, huh? I mean, do you have any way to pressurize that? So we try not to be prescriptive, but obviously you have to meet some bare minimum sanitation. The thing with custom, philosophically, the reason that custom is allowed is because, in theory, your customers can come and see what you've got and decide if they want to take their animal there. I'm not going to talk bad about anybody, but there's a wide range of quality at our custom facilities, and some of them I would eat off the gravel in the parking lot. It is so clean, and other places not so much. So that's kind of what custom is about. It's a relationship between you and the custom slaughterer, to decide what level of comfort do you have with them. So the next question I saw was, this is just for places that custom cut the meat, not for sellers that have a licensed butcher that kills, cuts, and packages your meat for a seller. I'm not sure.
I think that was back when you were talking about having the animal slaughtered in a place and then bringing it to your licensed kitchen.
Oh, is it Ryan? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, sorry about that. So basically, if I'm taking my beef to a licensed slaughterhouse who also packages, vacuum seals all my package, then that really doesn't apply then, correct? I don't need to worry about.
You don't need to worry about me. You will have to have a license to sell that meat, but and I'll let Michelle talk about that during her presentation. But no, you will, aside from the license and making sure you have a facility to store the finished labeled products, if they are inspected, if they have a USDA or MMPI mark of inspection, you're good to go.
Thank you.
And then the last one, where can I find regulations for custom slaughterhouses so I can decide if that is something to work towards or not? I am glad you asked. It is on our website, but if you cannot find it on the website, my email is at the end of the presentation, I believe. Just email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. Any other questions?
Thank you. And we're still running a little bit behind.
Sorry.
That's okay. If you're still going to be on, maybe you can respond to some of the questions in chat.
Yep.
Our next speaker is Michelle Newbegin, who's the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry Inspector Process Analyst Coordinator. And she's going to talk about the Maine licenses to sell red meat. And I will share my screen so we can see her slides. There, can you see the slides? Okay.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes, okay. Thanks, Dr. Eberly. Okay.
So turn on the slideshow and everything there. Can you see
Okay.
it?
Yes. Okay, so like Donna stated, I'm Michelle Nibigan, Inspection Process Analyst Coordinator with Department of Agriculture, Conservation and Forestry. And I'm here today to talk to you about all things licensing as it pertains to meat and poultry sales. Okay, do I need a license? A person may not engage in interstate commerce in the business of buying, selling, preparing, processing, packing, storing, transporting, or otherwise handling meat, food products, or poultry products unless that person holds a valid license. This also holds true for all food products, not just meat products. The only exception would be fresh produce. You can sell fresh produce without a license. Next, okay, so the license type depends on the activity, what your business plan is. If you want to have a commercial slaughterhouse license, that's what you would need to have a red poultry inspected slaughter facility, and that would just cover the slaughter. In order to process livestock meat, food products, poultry, or poultry products, you'd also need a commercial meat processing license. Those two licenses are $50 each, so they're not too bad. And then you can, a lot of times too, you need more than one license, but you can lump them all together so that you don't have to fill out several applications. Next. Okay, so this is where Dr. Eberly was talking about the retail exemption. To further process meat under the retail exemption, you would need a retail food establishment license and a license to further process red meat. And we also have a couple establishments licensed where they don't have a kitchen at their retail location. So they rent a commercial kitchen, process the meat there, and bring it back to the retail location. And so when you do that, you just need the retail food establishment license and prepackaged meat license at your retail location, and then the commercial processing license at the commercial kitchen location. And then if you want to vacuum pack or make ready-to-eat food such as beef jerky, you would need to submit a variance to the department. And once that's approved by the program manager or the director, then you can make those products. A wholesale distributor of meat and poultry products license is required to wholesale and distribute prepackaged inspected red meat and or poultry to restaurants, hotels, institutions, and other stores for resale or business use. That's a $50 license if people are interested in cost. And a license can be amended at any time if you decide to add a license type. Now you want to wholesale, you can just give us a call and we can amend your license to add the activity. Or at the same time, if you decide you don't want to wholesale anymore, you can call us and we can amend it to take it off. I don't know how interested this group is in poultry, but to operate under the grower producer fewer than 20,000 bird exemption, you would need a commercial processing license. And I think Dr. Eberly is going to go into that in more detail tomorrow. So we can go into the next slide. The commercial processing license is also what you need for the small enterprise fewer than 20,000 bird exemption to sell product retail and wholesale within the state as whole, halves, quarters, and parts. Oh, and then no license is required if you just want to do the fewer than 1,000 bird exemption. That's a registration though. And so you can find the registration online at this link and just submit the form to us so that we know you're there. A lot of times we will pay you a visit to give you advice on how to set your operation up and things like that, but no license or fees required. Okay, so if you want to take your product to to farmers markets, craft fairs, things like that, there's a mobile vendor license that's required. But you can, one mobile vendor license, and you can take it wherever you want to take it within the state of Maine. it's only for prepackaged food though. The license doesn't cover any processing on site at all. If you want to make burgers, things like that, that's for another, you need a different department's license for that. And then you'd need a prepackaged meat license if you wanted to sell prepackaged meat as a mobile vendor. So the mobile vendor license is $20 and the prepackaged meat license is $10. And sometimes we need a food storage warehouse license. If you're having your animals slaughtered, you don't have a place to store it at home, or even if you store it at home, you would need a license to do that. Next, we have a couple of uncommon meat and poultry licenses. I mean, they're so uncommon as like, I'm not even sure about this broker one. We may have one entity licensed as a broker. So you're engaged in the business of buying or selling livestock products or poultry products for other persons on commission or otherwise negotiating purchases or sales of these products. Yeah, I think that's a $50 license and we only have one person licensed. And the same goes for the public warehouse. If you've got a big warehouse with a bunch of freezers in it and you want to store products for other people, that's what this is for. The only one I know of in the state of Maine, I believe, is Americold in South Portland. So to obtain a license application, I've listed the website down here, or you can call our office and one of my staff would be happy to either email you or mail you a food and fuel license application. If you happen to call, they can help you fill it out too. So that might work out good for you. And then if you're processing, for those who are processing and you have private water and septic sources, we require a water test. Has to be performed by a state accredited laboratory and done within 30 days of the application date if you're a new application, or within the year if it's a renewal. So sometimes if your renewal is timed right, you may avoid a water test for 1 year. And so I think the next slides are just lists of the accredited labs. And you need a test for coliform and nitrates. And if you're lucky enough to be on municipal sources, no water test or septic approval is required. Or for those selling prepackaged foods only, of course, you wouldn't need a water test or septic. So the septic approval, if you have the HHE 200 subsurface wastewater disposal system application from when your septic was installed, that's awesome. You can send that in and be done with it. Or you can get a letter from a town code enforcement officer or from a licensed plumbing inspector on their letterhead stating that their septic is in working order, suitable for your purposes, and is in compliance with Maine subsurface wastewater disposal rules. That will work too. And you only need to submit your septic information once. We keep it on file. Unless you have issues and you need to get a new septic or you're adding new license types that may increase your septic use, we may need it again, but typically we keep it on file for you so you don't have to go through that expense twice. And so to apply, you would complete the license application, enclosed all required documents, which is the water test, the septic, perhaps the approved variance, along with appropriate fees. You can mail it to us or fax it to us. And then once we have a completed application, we've got 30 days by law to get you an inspection. Doesn't always take that long, but that's kind of your worst case scenario. So you want to try and get your application in at least 30 days before you wish to start. That way nobody's held up. And then if you need to contact us, this is the mainline phone number. This is our QAR's main website. I actually should have put my email address on there. I did not, but it's michelle.newbegin@maine.gov. If you've got specific questions, licensing questions that I can help with, I'm happy to do so. And if you've got any questions, I can answer them now. Or let me see, are there any down here?
You have one in the chat box you could answer.
We have a license to sell beef. We've processed under our own label. We didn't see the Maine inspector. I'm guessing because, yeah, we've actually resumed inspections. As long, you know, everybody seems to be participating with the COVID restrictions and things like that. So, but yeah, there was a while there that we weren't really doing, we were pretty much just doing initial inspections to get businesses up and going. We weren't doing any routines.
Any other questions? Michelle? Oh,
Oh, whoops.
in the chat?
So you raise your own beef, you have it processed as an inspected plant. You likely do need a resale certificate. That's handled by Maine Revenue. But I guess I need to know more about how you, I mean, are you having it processed at an inspected plant and then your buyer is just picking it up at the plant, or are you selling it from your farm? Because if you're having it processed at an inspected plant, you sell it to me and I just go pick it up, there's really no license required for that. Yes, thank you, Colt, putting my email address. That's great. Sorry.
Have any other questions? Get us right back on time, Michelle. Thank you.
Yeah, so Tom, that would be fine. If you pick it up and deliver it to the, you know, directly to the purchaser, then there's really no license required for that. And I'll stick around if somebody thinks of a question or something. I'm happy to answer it.
Okay. And just so folks know, if you want to copy the chat, if you go down to the lower right of your screen, there are 3 little dots. If you hit those 3 little dots, it will say save chat. But I do intend to send everyone an email with our speakers' contact information, email, as well as the presentations and a link to the recording for today's meeting. Now, we've got 2 folks available. I haven't seen that Kelly Young is on yet, but Barry Higgins is right here with me. I'm going to turn on his microphone. I'll turn the camera on him. And you wait a minute, let me turn on his microphone. But Barry is going to give us his perspective from harvest and processor site. He also raises animals too, so he can give us from soup to nuts. So I'll turn it over to Barry.
Yes, good morning. I don't have much of a presentation. I'm hoping we get some questions. We built a new state inspected facility in 2006, and we've built something almost every year to keep up with the production. And I believe right now we're the largest state inspected plant, doing more animals, and we're all red meat, no poultry, beef, pork, and lambs and goats. And we've been through about everything we can do and everything we can't do. and we do have a good inspection department here in the state. They cover us 4 days a week. We also do we must be about 50-50 between inspected and custom. We're custom. We do our inspected product. If we don't have a full day of inspection, we follow it up with custom, both in the slaughter facility and also the processing facility. And we are pretty much, we're not out to 2021. We still have a lot of room in, excuse me, 2022. We still have a lot of room in 2021. I'm fully booked through third week of February, but after that, we get some more room if any of you folks need some slaughter and processing. We start every day, Monday through Thursday, with inspected slaughter and also inspected processing. And I'll explain a little bit about the any animal that's slaughtered under inspection. We have to have a inspector on the premises at all times during the slaughter, through the whole process. And then that, when it's done, it's get the mark of inspection rolled into the coolers. And then when we're processing, there only has to be an inspector there 2 hours during the day. They don't stand over us when we're cutting. They're there to spot check you, make sure the labeling's right, and the big thing for us is our HACCP plan, which we follow to a T, is sanitation, and that's followed whether we're under inspected or custom. We don't treat custom any different than we do inspected, both on the kill floor and processing room. If we do not have some weeks we extra busy and we ask for more coverage, and generally Dr. Eberly will work us in for a process for an inspector there on Friday if necessary. We try to schedule it so they don't have to, but sometimes we might have if we have a huge amount of slaughter, maybe the week before or 10 days before, we may require a 5th day of processing, and maybe a couple times a year we have to slaughter under inspection on Friday. But we have a inspector on premise at least 4 days a week. We are able now, if you have labels you want approved, we're able, unless there is a I'm trying to think of the word, unless you've got a special thing such as grass-fed or what's the word, Dr. Eberly? You fill in there? Yeah. Unless they have a what am I looking for? The special.
Unmute. Hi. It's a special claim. If it has something that has to be backed up with some kind of documentation, so you can say something that, it's beef, that's pretty obvious. But if you want to say it's grass-fed, the producer has to provide, affidavits or some kind of documentation swearing that it was grass-fed before you're allowed to put it on the package.
Organic, born and raised in Maine, all that stuff. It's a special claim, what I was trying to say. We can't prove that in the plan if it's just a normal beef or a pig or a lamb that needs to be processed. We can actually approve those in the slaughterhouse. Between us and the inspector, we get the job done. But otherwise than that, I'd really like to have some questions, and I'd really like to try to answer them to the best of my knowledge. The other thing is we are a producer also, and we're doing right now, I think over 400 head a year of our own beef and pigs, and run those through the facility. If we get an animal sold with a side of the quarter, we run some of our own through there under custom. because it's cheaper to do them custom because of the extra labor and extra labels it takes to do them inspected. The custom animals we run through have a label on each cut that goes out of there, not for sale. And everything is done not for sale. In other words, the customer you are selling them to is for their own use. And and we do a lot for a lot of you people that are listening to the same way. There's one thing that we've had to go up on, and I think all the slaughter facilities have in the last couple of years, is the hide market has gone down to practically nothing, and we've had to charge extra for slaughter. And we used to be able to gain quite a lot of income on our salted hides. And right at this moment, all of our hides are going into compost pile. We haven't salted a hide since last spring sometime. And it's added expense. There is quite an expense to salting hides. There's a lot of extra labor. Not only salting them, something you have to do every day, and then you also have to palletize them, get them ready to go. It's hard work, and hides are heavy, and but the value of a hide has gone to very low. I don't think we can break even salting hides right now. So some of the plants are still doing that, speculating that someday they're going to go back up. We chose not to.
We do have a question. What is the extent of the documentation for a claim such as grass-fed?
You have to make out an affidavit and send it to the inspection department, have it approved. Your affidavit will have to be certified, and if you can get an approval for what you're doing, why then you can have that statement on your label.
That's Jennifer and Michelle's bailiwick.
Yeah, please chime in on that.
Oh, you're muted. Jennifer, you're muted.
Okay, yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble. I can't tell you off the top of my head because I don't do the label approvals, thank goodness, because I don't like them. But I can find that information out for you. It usually does involve an affidavit, and there'll be specific things that are in the affidavit that you have to swear to. But if you send an email, and I can put my email in the chat as well, I can look it up for you. There's a document out there as well. If you Google USDA label approval, label approvals or label submissions, special claims, the guidance document will come up, and that's what we use. But I can find out for that specifically. Same thing with, I see there's another question for natural beef. It's kind of funny because some of it, like 100% beef is okay, but 100% natural is not necessary, but natural is okay. It's very technical, which is why I don't do it and I outsource it to someone else. But I can, for both of you, if you like, I can send you the document and I can tell you exactly which one is, if it's a special, if it's a special claim, and B, what documentation you need. It's not usually that onerous, but you know, sometimes people get into trouble because they're like, oh, it's grass fed, you know, except at the end when I give it grain for a week. And it's like, it's not really grass fed then, is it? So sometimes people get into having to, you know, what do I have to do to get the claim that I want to get? But I can send both of you the guidance document and then the specific answers. And then there was another question, do you do non-amenable species deer? So deer, do you want me to, that's for Barry. You answer that, Barry, my bad.
Yeah, what was the question?
Do you do non-amenable species like deer?
No, we stopped doing deer 4 or 5 years ago because we was getting busier with the beef and the pork, and we did most up until last year was first. This 2020 was first year we haven't done most. You can do wild game in an inspected facility, but you have to keep it separated. Never can touch. And the reason we stopped was we got too busy. We were actually up 60% on beef 2020 over 2019, and we was up 30% on pigs. And the reason we wasn't up 60% is they couldn't do anymore. We was maxed out. Those affidavits, if you get a special claim, whatever it may be, have to be on file in my slaughter facility before we can label them. So in other words, I have to have them on file to label them as whatever your special claim may be.
Okay, here's a long question. If we're selling to a customer who will pick up from the processor, we want to give them a custom invoice at time of pickup based on hanging weight. Is this allowed? Barry, do you guys work with operators to supply hanging weight for our records before we have the customer pick up at your facility?
Yes, we do. Many times, well, we get all kinds of ways it happens. Sometimes the customer pays for the processing. Sometimes the customer pays for processing. Sometimes the owner pays all of the processing fees. We have an individual receipt for each animal, or sometimes it's each quarter. So you can have people pick up the facility, and it's up to you. Some of our producers will say, don't let the meat go until they've sent me a check, and I'll call you when it's ready. But yeah, we do that, and we bill many times. If somebody's sold a beef to 4 quarters, 4 people, 4 families, we actually make out 4 receipts. Each quarter gets a quarter of the slaughter fee, quarter of the processing fee, quarter of the smoking fee if it happens to be smoked. And yeah, it keeps the office busy. And we also have a spec sheet on every customer that you have. We like to directly talk to your customer so that we can get it cut exactly and packaged exactly they want it for their family size. We have some people that do all of the spec sheets, but I prefer to talk to your customer, not to try to sell them my beef, but to get it done the way they want it done. And but if you prefer to do all the paperwork, that's fine too. So we work with you to try to do the best job we can for you and your customer so they come back again. Did that answer the question, Donna?
I think so, yeah. Okay, I don't see any more on the chat. I'm going to take over so folks will be able to hear me a little bit better. And our last speaker is Kilby Young, and I can't see that he's on unless he's on one of the phones. Are you there? He was going to speak on processing and value-added meat products. I guess he's not here. Well, Barry, maybe you could talk a little bit about your smoking operation.
Yeah, we developed the
Brown sugar hickory smoke product that is I think we've got just to run right amount of salt, right amount of brown sugar in there that it gets the old juices going in your mouth. And once you eat a piece of bacon or a piece of ham, you can't wait to get to that next bite. And we're currently only custom. We're trying to get, as a matter of fact, Dr. Ebley has got my HACCP plan for my smoking, but it's been a long process. For some reason, I don't know why, but it seems like the state of Maine is like one of the toughest in the state to get a HACCP plan approved in the nation. I mean, I worked with some people that work in all 48 states, and they say it's really tough up here. I don't know, but if I could ask for any help anywhere from the state of Maine, it would be to write HACCP plans in for different processes. We're working on a HACCP plan for bacon, which is in the Dr. Ebley's right now. We've got one for hams, which will be different because it's a little different process, and then the third one will be jerky. And it's just tough to get them approved up here. But anyway, soon as we get it, our bacon will be on the market, and everybody loves it. You can get it custom right now, and then you'll have some happy customers. We guarantee everything 100%.
Okay, do we have any other questions? And I think all our other speakers are still on. So if you have a question for Colt or Jennifer or Michelle, they're still on. And while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I'm going to launch a poll. If you just take a minute, let us know if this program was helpful to you, yes, somewhat, or no. And we do have another session tomorrow that we're going to focus on poultry. And you may realize that the Maine Department of Agriculture's Maine Agriculture show is going on right now as we speak. It's all virtual. And maybe Colt, Jennifer, or Michelle could put up the link to where folks can get into that trade show, the ag trade show. This webinar was linked into the trade show, so I'm not sure if we get any folks that came in through that portal or not. But do we have any other questions? And we've got 15 or 19 folks have completed the poll. I appreciate that. And most folks thought that this was helpful. So no other questions, then we'll close it for today and come back in tomorrow. Colt does have the Ag Trade Show website. And they wanted to know Barry's name of his facility is Maple Lane Farm. Sorry about that. Okay, if that's everything, thank you for coming. We'll see you tomorrow, maybe. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hi there.
I need to
Okay,
call
stop
Barry
the
and
last-
welcome pigs.
Are you going to ship your pigs, or I thought you were going to breed them? Oh, you've got, how many males do you have?
I've got 3 or 4 pigs I need to get killed in probably May, early May.
Oh, I forgot to mention that you and Robert did the preparing beef short ribs. It's on the Livestock Facebook page also. I listened to that for a little bit. That was pretty good. I noticed that you get a bite in.
When are you pigs ready for?
First week of May.
Can you give me a call when I get back there? I'll put you in.
Yep, I'll do that. Thank you.
Shouldn't be a problem. I got, speaking of that, I got 500 piglets coming May 10th. Which will be, that was one thing that, I should have spoke to you about while he was on is, this new breed that everybody's using for the commercial market. They don't put on the back fat that they used to. And, they're a great breed. If you get them 300 pounds, generally they're not fat. They get that inch like you talked about.
Yeah, they're landrace Yorkshire cross pigs, and they are bred specifically to put on muscle and not extra fat. So they're way more efficient. But you got to pour the grain to them if or they won't grow very well.
I can tell you, they go beat the band. They'll beat the old single crosses every time, I think, as far as putting on weight. And,
Yeah, if you give them free choice feed, they should be at slaughter weight in 5.5 months.
yeah. But anyway, we have 500 coming in, May 8th, I believe it is. And, we've had excellent luck with it.
Very good. Well, thanks, Barry.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I enjoyed it. What everybody, I didn't have much prepared, but I think we took care of any questions.
I think people like it.